Ooh, what's up, my pilots? Angryponcho here. We're back playing Minecraft with Redstone. This is episode 6, and in this episode we are going to build clocks. Pretty cool. Basically, the simplest description of a clock is a redstone circuit that turns its output on and off over and over forever without you having to do anything. So basically what we're looking for is some kind of circuit that will essentially flip a lever for us, just produce a signal that turns on and off over and over again. This is useful for a whole bunch of different tasks. It's just sort of, it's hard to even think of a specific example because really you could attach a clock to almost anything. You could have a clocked cannon if you could build pistons contraptions to reload it. You could have clocked piston doors to create an obstacle course in a challenge map. You could have a clock that reset a combination every now and then. You could have a clock that did all kinds of different things. Or you could even attach a clock to a broken door and any kind of door and create a maze in which the doors keep opening and closing. So basically it's anything where you want stuff to keep changing without you having to do the changing yourself. So the simplest clock is the rapid pulsar. It's really it's really simple actually to build. So for all of these clocks, the output is the blue like usual, and the white wool is the clock itself. So we can keep that straight. And I have some levers here that turn off some of the clocks as they tend to overheat. So this first one, the rapid pulsar, it consists entirely of these two wool blocks and the torch and the redstone here. So basically what happens is this torch sort of powers and depowers itself in a loop here. And the result is that it turns this signal on and off really quickly until it burns itself out. And you can see it takes a while for torches to come back from being burnt out sometimes. So occasionally it's nice just to see how the output looks. Just turns on and off pretty much as fast as you can get things to go, and then it burns itself out. So in order to keep this flashing all the time whenever the torch turns itself back on, I'm just going to power this line, which sort of disables the clock. Pretty much all these clocks actually have a lever on them that disables them, and they're all disabled right now, so they're not going nuts. So here's a rapid pulsar with redundancy. The difference here is just that we have multiple torches, and you could extend this to be longer if you wanted. I think 4 is all you need to guarantee that the signal always is oscillating, and you don't have all the torches burnt out. So what happens here is you get the torches essentially taking turns oscillating the signal and burning each other out. But the signal, if you pay close attention to it, it's a little bit wonky. So you'll see now and then it seems like it sort of stutters. Like there. Where it goes through this pattern of turning itself on and off, and then occasionally it'll stay on for a little bit longer than normal, or it'll stay off for a little bit longer than normal. So this is an unstable clock, which means that this output is not predictable. It's not just a consistent on, off, on, off, on, off at the same pace, very regular pacing. Yeah, you can see it makes a bloody racket. All the burning of the torches out over and over and over again. Yeah, so this is just very unstable, but it produces a really fast signal, and if you just need a fast signal to turn something on and off really quickly, this probably would even be too fast for most of the things I listed, like obstacle courses and such, because it's really, really quick. If you put a piston on here, it would be difficult to get by the piston. It would be moving the block up and down so quickly. But yeah, so you only need 4 torches to keep it oscillating all the time, but yeah, output's a little bit funky. So here's a vertical version of the rapid pulsar. And again, I have this line here so that when I power all of these, it just turns off the torches. That way they don't burn themselves out over and over again while we're walking around. This one's a little bit different because it's, like I say, it's a vertical design. And of course, all of these toggleable levers are optional. This is just what I use to keep the system from burning itself out while I'm just walking around. And you see, these 4 torches do the exact same thing as the last clock, except that the line goes across the top of all the blocks. It's identical to this one, just built a different way, and the output would come out on the other end, or actually pretty much anywhere. You could stick it wherever you liked, as long as it's attached to that line on the top there. Alright, let's turn that off, for God's sakes. That's so annoying. Alright. So here's a better version of clocks. This is a stable clock, and this is the 5 clock. This is probably the most well-known clock if you've ever played in alpha, because this is what everybody had to do when you wanted a clock. Other methods weren't reliable. The rapid pulsar just gave you junk output, just on and off in a completely unpredictable manner. And then all the other stuff like pistons and repeaters hadn't been put into the game yet. So this is what we had back in alpha, and it works out pretty well actually. If I deactivate my lever so that the circuit actually starts running, you'll see that blue output line has very nice, predictable blinking. It's on and off for 5 ticks each. And so it's this nice regular on, off, and it's got the same amount of time it's off as it is on. And so it's basically a very nice clock. It's exactly what you would want it to do. It's nice and stable. And it doesn't blink any of these torches fast enough that they'll burn out. So you could leave this here forever, and it would just keep doing this, and you wouldn't have you'd have no problems. So, okay, there's a couple more. Let me go ahead and show you the next design before we get into the logic of why this signal keeps changing itself. Why does it keep going around and around and on and off? What's keeping it in that state of suspension? So here's just the exact same clock we just saw there. It's now been condensed a little bit. This is just a smaller design, but it's the exact same logic actually, and the torches are even sort of relative to each other in similar places. And the output line would be over here by this torch. Now honestly, these output lines, I've just put them in an arbitrary location, wherever it seemed convenient. But you could patch in from anywhere along here as long as you're bringing it from just one torch's power. So if I wanted to, I could put an output line here. And you can see they have opposite states here, that one and this one. So depending on where you put it, it might be on or off when you start it or stop it, but it's really not an issue in general because it's just going to keep repeating. Alright, so there's a more condensed version of the 5 clock. I'm going to go ahead and disable it so I don't like having it blinking all the time. And then, back here, we have a vertical 5 clock. Now this one's a little bit harder to follow. The output line is back here off to the side. So if you wanted just to put a clock in your wall and have a signal come out of the wall, this is how you could do it. It's a little bit hard to follow, but basically you have this signal, say if it starts with this torch. This torch turns itself on, powers that wire, powers that block, deactivates that torch, depowers this, powers that, powers this block, which powers the redstone dust on top, which depowers this torch, deactivating that, depowering this block, powering that torch, powering this redstone, turning the torch which we started with on to off. And the cycle continues. Kind of hard to look at it in just one glimpse and sort of say, oh, I understand how that's working. You really sort of have to follow the signal through in this loop that it's making, and look at the rippling effect of each torch turning off and turning on and how it affects the next one in the cycle here. That's a fairly nice 5 clock design there, the vertical one. I like it. So now you might get a little bit creative and say, you know, I want to do this with just a few torches. I don't need to do 5, right? I can just do 4, for example. Well, this is what you might attempt to do if you were going to just try and build a clock yourself. You'll say, oh, okay, well, I'll just put a torch here, and it'll power the next block, and then I'll put a torch on that block, so it gets defeated by this torch, and then that'll power the next block. It will turn off this torch, that'll power the next block, turn off this torch. But as you can see, this ain't blinking. So I can break some redstone here and swap some things around and try and get it to go, but try as you might, you're not going to be able to get this to go. And the reason is, this is a stable circuit. This is only 5 torches instead of the 4, or this is only 4 instead of the 5 in these clocks over here. And so there's something crucial that's different about the 2 of these circuits that makes this one keep repeating over and over again that this one doesn't have. There's a crucial difference between the 2. And you may have caught it when I explained the 5 clock here, but it's essentially this. This torch powering on has an effect that turns itself back off. And that's why it keeps repeating. So let me explain this again. Say, let's do it with this clock over here. So we'll start with the output torch, which is this one here. So suppose, well, I'll do it with one that's actually on so you can see. Let's start, oh, balls. Let's just start here. Okay, so here's the first torch. This torch turns on. And I'm going to show that the effect of this torch turning on is to turn this torch off. So this torch turns on, which powers this dust, which powers this block, deactivating this torch, deactivating this wire, allowing that torch to turn on, powering this wire, powering that block, which forces this torch to turn off, which this should be off here actually. So the power here is coming from this lever. So this torch being off means this dust turns off, allowing this torch to turn on, powering this dust, powering this block, turning this torch off. So this torch turning on sends a signal through that turns itself off. And all 5 of these torches are connected in this loop. And you could start from any one of them, and you would see that turning it on turns itself off. And that's why the signal just keeps going around and around, because it's trying to find a stable state and never does. It just keeps turning every time it turns itself on, that turns itself off. And every time it turns itself off, equivalently, it turns itself back on. If you just keep cycling through, there's no way to ever get it to work out. But if you have an even number of torches and you do it just wrong, like this, it actually is a nice stable diagram. So let's start from a torch that's on. So this torch turning on, we want it to end up turning itself off. We'll see if it works out. This torch is on, which powers this dust, powering that block, turning off this torch, which deactivates this wire, allowing this torch to turn on, which powers this dust, powering that block, turning this torch off, which turns this dust off, which lets this torch stay on. So you see, it doesn't work out. This torch being on keeps itself on. So this actually isn't a clock. This is what we would call a latch. This is actually just a fat RS NOR latch with 2 inputs. But we'll get into those. That's going to be the next section we do is latches. So you'll understand this a little bit more in the next video, I think. What you need to understand at this point is this crucial juncture is that this torch being on has to have the effect of turning itself back off in order for what you have to be a clock. Okay, so don't build that unless you want it to stay just like that. But it is possible to do it with 4 torches. You can make a clock with just 4 torches. I'll try and fly, man. There we go. So you can see this clock has 4 torches. I call this the U-bend clock because it's got this nice U shape to it here, or maybe a C. I guess now it's a U. There we go. So I'll just let it run so you can observe the behavior here. Now this clock isn't quite like the 5 clock, and the biggest difference is because it's only 4 torches, you have to do something a little bit creative to get it to actually be unstable. So here what we would want to have happen is this torch being on forces this torch to turn itself back off. And if you watch the signal, that's exactly what's happening, but it's just fairly quick, so it's a little bit hard to follow from just watching the circuit. But I'm not going to step through this one because it'll take a little while to explain all the different effects that everything has. What you need to catch is that the output is not the same. If you watch here, this line is off more than it's on. And it might be hard to perceive. I think it's actually fairly close to the same amount. But I think it's actually off more than it is on. And it's easy to follow that if you watch the circuit itself and you realize that only one of those 4 sections of wire is on at any given time. Which means you should perceive this as being on, I think, about 1/3 as long as it is off. Although it's a little bit hard to tell with the naked eye, and the frame rate on YouTube isn't the best, so just take my word for it. This clock is off for longer than it's on. So you may or may not want that. If you don't want that, use the 5 clock, because it's nice and symmetrical. Alright, but everyone is in the comments is saying, oh, come on, just use repeaters. It's easy. You don't need to do any of this fancy stuff. Okay, well, that's true. You can build a clock with just a circle of repeaters. But as I'm sort of demonstrating here, it's not really a stable device, because what happens is it doesn't want to be on or off. It just wants to be off. If you just lay it down, it doesn't ever start blinking. Whereas when you build a clock, it automatically starts going once you've put it together properly. Whereas with a repeater clock, like the very simple one here, whereas you can see the signal would keep going around in a circle through the repeaters since it only goes one direction. When you build it, there's going to be no power, and you have to send it a short pulse of power in order to get it started. Of course, this creates sort of a rippling effect through the circuit, where the power turning on here, ripples through this, and then works its way around. So you can put your output here, any of the places you want. And this is actually, if you just need a basic clock, this is fairly easy to build. And they actually fixed the bug. There used to be a bug where if you had one of these running, and you closed Minecraft and then opened it back up again, it wouldn't be running anymore. But I think they fixed that now, so it keeps working, thank goodness. But again, you do have to sort of prime it. When you first build it, you have to get that signal going. And I suppose once it's going, it'll just run like this forever. But you do have to get the length of that signal right, because the length of that signal matters with the behavior of this clock. So you see with that short burst I just gave it, only one of the four corners was on at any given time. But if I wait a little longer, now 2 out of the 4 are on at any given time. A little bit tricky to see. 2 out of the 4 are on. And if I, hang on, give it an even longer one, I can get it to go so that 3 out of the 4 are on. Now you might say, oh, that's actually good. I can use that. You know, what if I want 4 lines and 3 of them are on and 1 of them is off all the time and it keeps cycling? That would be kind of cool. I could do something with pistons or something. You know, it'd be neat. Sure, I mean, you could use this. You could use this property, but you do have to be aware of it in order to avoid messing yourself up. If you just wanted one of them to be on, but you had it so that you had this long pulse running through it, you wouldn't get the output you expected. So you have to be kind of careful with these repeater clocks. You have to sort of know what you're doing, to be honest. Okay, so here's an extendable repeater clock. This is basically the design that you would continue here. It's just a longer loop, and you can build it in this 2 by however long space that you want. And then, again, you have a primer somewhere where you start her up, and the signal runs around. I'm going to actually, there we go, get a nice short burst going through. So the way you would extend this is you would just keep repeating basically this pattern here, these 4 blocks. You would just put them in over and over and over. See, so I've only put them in twice. There's 4 of them here, there's 4 of them here. Of course, you could keep doing this as many times as you liked, and you know, with all the repeaters in there, you're never going to run out of signal, so it'll go forever and ever. And you could make a very long delay circuit with this, and you could have an even longer delay if you just filled this whole line up with repeaters here, basically replacing all the redstones, like this one here, with repeaters instead. You can introduce even more delay into the circuit, if that's the behavior you wanted. I like it just to be a simple, stable clock like this. So again, this clock is not going to be on for the same amount of time that it's off. Now, if you had a clock like this one with just the 4 outputs, you could actually use some clever OR gates, and you could build a clock that would be on for exactly as long as it is off. It's actually not very hard to do. But this one, it might be a little bit trickier depending on how many different lines you have connected up here, because this, say this, where's the output? I didn't put an output on this one. We'll put it over here, just as an example. So you see it's off for way longer than it's on, and the longer that this circuit gets, the longer the gap is going to be between its turning on every now and then. So you can see, if you imagine if you had 100 of these in a line, you know, the whole time we've been standing here, it might have blinked once, because it takes forever for that circuit to, that delay, the signal to propagate through that long delay circuit. And depending on how you adjusted your redstone repeaters here, you could make it even slower or faster. That's another advantage of these redstone repeater clocks, is that you can actually affect how long the how long the signal takes to go around. So I had this one on a very slow delay. I think if you put all 4 of them on the short delay, yeah, you can get a clock that really moves. And I don't think this is fast enough to burn out a torch, but it's pretty quick. It's a fairly industrious clock. So it's up to you how you want to delay these. You actually can make it irregular if you want. You could have 2 of them slow and 1 of them fast. And you can see the kind of did it behavior that you would get with that. It would be like a swing beat. It wouldn't be a regular beat. So I'll go ahead and turn this back off. There we go. So there's your repeater clocks. And that's really all I'd ever would recommend. Like, if you're going to do a clock, you're going to need one of the 3 that I've shown you, I think. You're going to need to use the rapid pulsar for just random blinking, or you can use a nice stable 5 clock for something that just turns on and off in a very consistent manner. Or you could even use the 4 clock if you just want it to be off for a little bit longer than it's on. Or if you want to keep it real simple, you can work with something using the repeaters like this. But there is another option that I typically don't like to use because it's just, I feel like it makes things more complicated, and I'm not even sure if they're meant to work. I'll go ahead and show you this one first. This is a stable 4 clock, and it's made with pistons. So the way this works is you've got this pit in the center with 4 torches stuck on the ground here, and then you have this block above them, and what happens is whichever of the 4 torches the block is above, it's going to send power through that block, which is going to send it out the side here. And if I actually put the red dust in, you'll see the behavior here. So whenever the let me turn this fucking thing off. Jeez. So whenever the power is, whenever the block is attached, like say in front of this piston, it allows power to go through here, which activates the piston, pushing the block away. So effectively, each of these 4 pieces that we sort of have stuck together here, there's a 2x3 piece here with the 4 wool, the piston, and the torch. And there's 4 of them stuck next to each other here. Each of the 4 of these 2x3 pieces here just turns itself off as soon as the power turns on. That's something we're going to see in the other redstone, or the other piston clock as well. So it basically just keeps running itself around like that. It's a little bit of a bulky clock, and I don't see why you would build it this way, because you can get the exact same output with just a loop of 4 repeaters rather than doing it like this. So, but you could do it like this if you wanted. That's really all I have to say about it. It's like, here's another way to do it if you want. I would just do the repeaters method or the actual stable clock. There is one reason you might want to use the piston clocks, and that's because you can get some ridiculous output here. This is a 1-tick piston clock, and I don't know if this has not been confirmed or anything, but I think this is probably a bug because it doesn't seem to make sense that it would work like this. Let me just show you what. Let me get rid of this piston. Let me show you what the output looks like over here. Okay, so everyone's saying, I don't think it works. The output's not even turning on. Well, it's actually turning on and off so quickly that the game can't even load it. I mean, the visual elements of the game run much more slowly than the logic elements in the background, and so the logic for whether or not this line is on or off is going so much faster than the visualization of this line that we actually don't even see it turning on and off. But, ow, if I were to put a piston here, do you see why I think this is a bug? Like, the game shouldn't work like that? But, I don't know, it works in this version. This is 1.3.2 right now, so you can use it if you want, but no guarantees that it'll work forever. If Minecraft were my game, I would make it so this didn't work, but, you know. Here's the logic of how it actually runs, I think, in this version of the game. Basically, when this piston... Okay, so where's the... Oh yeah, the power from this piston right now is coming from this lever. I've disabled it. So, but when I turn the lever off, the piston is going to retract. And when that piston retracts, this torch stays powered all the time. So it sends power through this line, and then when the piston is retracted, this white block, this is a sticky piston here if you didn't notice, this white block gets pulled over here, and the signal runs into it. That powers this block. Powering a block adjacent to a piston activates the piston, so it's going to push the piston out. When the piston pushes itself out like it is now, the power that's going through this repeater Actually, this torch is powered all the time. It powers this repeater, and when the block here is in front of the repeater sends power right through the block. Remember, we demonstrated that repeaters can do that when just plain wires can't. So you get an output pulse that turns on for a moment. Of course, as soon as this piston does extend and does send the signal through, this line is no longer meeting anything here. This extended piston arm can't transfer power, so you see it actually just drops right down to the ground there. And so this line just runs over here and doesn't run into anything. And so the piston is no longer powered, which means it immediately pulls itself back, which of course starts to cycle over, and it goes back out again. But this happens so quickly, it happens as fast as the piston can update itself in terms of its motion. And so it actually turns itself on and off, or it turns itself on or off every tick. So this is actually turning it's like one tick it's on, the next tick it's off. One tick it's on, the next tick it's off. And I think the game's visualizations only update every 2 ticks, and that's why you see the line just looking like it's off all the time. Kind of crazy, super loud too. That's one big reason not to use the piston clocks unless you really want this crazy behavior here, is that they're loud as hell. All the other clocks are silent, pretty much, except for the pulsars, which burn out the torches. A good quiet clock is nice. And there's nothing worse than being in a house late at night and having like a grandfather clock or something in your living room just chiming every 15 minutes. That's what it would be like having one of these in your house. Just constant noise. But yeah, there are other clocks, and of course there's more green space over here. There are other kinds of clocks you can build. You can use all kinds of weird behavior, to be honest. You can use cacti. You can use mine carts. You can use, you can use the growth of reeds to activate bud switches to activate clocks. It's weird. You can get into some seriously complicated stuff if you want. But the reason I haven't built any of this stuff is because you really don't need it. It's for like end game only, and I suppose if this series goes on long enough, I might actually build some of those devices for you guys. I know I sure want to build a bud switch eventually, so you guys can see how that works, even though that, again, I think is a bug. It might eventually be changed, if not fixed, quote-unquote. So I'll show those eventually if they become pertinent, but the reason they're not here now is that you don't need them. All the functionality is here. You can make delays as long as you want, you can turn signals on and off at different rates and for different amounts of time. And you can even get ridiculously fast output or unstable output or whatever you like. There's a whole lot of opportunities here, and I think that these 4 kinds of clocks, the pulsars, the 5 clocks, the repeater clocks, and the piston clocks, I guess with the 4 clocks as well, give you everything you need. And again, there's a book in here, so if you want to read through that, it's basically just the same thing I've said here, but condensed into like 4 sentences. So if that doesn't show I'm long-winded, nothing does. Alright, so I think next time on Let's Play Minecraft with Redstone, we're going to build RS NOR latches, which is the very basic unit of memory in Minecraft. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.